What is up, guys? The Strong Boys 19 here. So this is going to be a different kind of topic that I would like to have a discussion with you guys, and it is going to be on overproduced albums. Now, overproduction is one of the most problematic things being a musician and in the music industry. Most of the problems of overproduction can either be multi-layered effects, compression that's too much in the mix, a lot of distortion that makes the sound difficult to cope, production from his or her own style. But this is something that had been in my mind for some time, and I would like to share my thoughts of albums that I consider to be overproduced. So if you have some albums that are in this subject, type them all down in the comments below, because I'm very curious. The first album in this list, Be Here Now by Oasis, the band's third studio album released in 1997 to Creation Records, follow-up to What's the Story, Morning Glory. And the reason why this album is overproduced, it is because of a lot of multi-layered guitar effects that were used on some songs, and of course with the sound of the orchestra arrangements that were on some songs, including Stand By Me and the long 9-minute song All Around the World. But here are some facts about the process from the production. Noel, wanting to make the album as dense and colossal feeling as possible, layered multiple guitar tracks on several songs. In many instances, he dubbed 10 channels with identical guitar parts in an effort to create a sonic volume. The tracks are more layered and intricate than before, and each contains multiple guitar overdubs. While Morris had previously stripped away layers of overdubs on the band's debut Definitely Maybe, during the production of Be Here Now, he seemed to gleefully encourage such excess. My Big Mouth has an estimated 30 tracks of guitar overdubbed onto the song. I find the original version of the album to be far too raw, and it can be difficult for me to get used to, but I prefer to listen to the 2016 reproduced and remastered version from Noel Gallagher's take on the remaster, and I find that to be more of a better listening experience. The acoustic guitars were there, and even the bass guitar, and it's a bit more comfortable than the original sound from the release of the album. The next album that I will put in this list of overproduction is Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy. I personally would say that a lot of the songs really do feel all over the place, and if you have a look of the lineup of this era of the band on Wikipedia, it's just only Axl Rose as the original member. But have a look at the list of musicians that participated for this album. Took the band, well, Axl Rose and a lot of musicians, more than 10 years to make, and the songs themselves feel something uninspired, and the guitar tones can be too compressed, and I really cannot get into what's going on because of not only on the production but just the album in general. But we're not talking about the album, I'm just talking about the overproduction, and it just makes my listening experience of this album just not enjoyable. And that's pretty much all I want to say about that one. The next album is Morbid Angel Illu Divinium Insanus, and the reasons why I had put this album in the list are that the industrial elements that were in this album makes the sound of the album very tepid. The sound of the drums that are too in your face, and it's sometimes unbearable to hear the triggered drums that high in the mix, and even with the distortion from the guitars, it was too much for me to dive into this album in a better way. And I really did not like what I was really trying to get into, because it's still one of the most divided albums in metal history, and I've already described my thoughts on it before, but I find that this production is one of the most difficult and horrible produced albums. Now the next three albums are by one band, and that is Metallica. Saint Anger, Death Magnetic, and Lulu. Saint Anger can be highly controversial, heavily divided. I cannot really get into the whole thing, and the production is one of them. It was just a huge wall of noise, of overgained distortion, and even the whole thing of the snare drum controversy. And here is what Lars Ulrich had thought about it at the time.
Drummer Lars Ulrich achieved a unique sound on Saint Anger by turning off the snares on his snare drum, resulting in a drum tone with far more ring than is usual in rock and metal. This sound received much backlash from fans and critics alike. Ulrich said, "One day I forgot to turn the snare on because I wasn't thinking about this stuff. At the playbacks, I decided I was really liking what I was hearing. It had a different ambience. It sang back to me in a beautiful way." Regarding the backlash about the sound, he stated, "It's crazy, that kind of close-mindedness." Rock said, "I would say I've only done something this brutal sounding when I've done demos. It probably sounds heavier because it's Metallica, but really this was a 15 minutes on the drums sound type of thing."
So there you go. Whether you like it or not, I personally would not say that this is a very well produced album. But Death Magnetic, produced by none other than a household name, Rick Rubin, produced records from Black Sabbath, System of a Down, Beastie Boys, Slayer, and this production that he had done, I really dislike, and it's heavily controversial because of the term of loudness war. And in my opinion, this production is god awful. And here's what some facts had to be said about the loudness war controversy.
The album has been criticized for having compromised sound quality due to an excessively compressed dynamic range, leading to audible distortion. Shawn Michaels of The Guardian explains that this is a result of the loudness war, an ongoing industry effort to make recordings as loud as possible. Metallica and Rubin initially declined to comment, while the band's co-manager Cliff Bernstein stated that complainers were in a minority and that response to the album had otherwise been overwhelmingly positive. Ulrich later confirmed in an interview with Blender that some creative control regarding the album's production had been transferred to Rubin, but also stressed his satisfaction with the final product.
It doesn't spoil the listening of the album for me, though, from what the album sounded like on the instrumentation and the songs in general, because I do like this album. It certainly is, to me, a better follow-up than Saint Anger, but it's the production that was executed so darn poorly. And this was, to me, one of the most grating albums to really get into what's going on. And with Lulu, with Lou Reed, it's not as over-the-top mentality sounding of sounds like Death Magnetic, but despite the overall experience of this, just the sound of it being so repetitive and very loose and disjointed, it makes the whole thing very difficult for me to compromise. And I don't really like the drum sound on this either, because it's far too punchy, and it's again the same thing for Death Magnetic in my honest opinion, because the drums were just assaulting to the ears. And with Lulu's production, it's a bit similar to that album, but I really don't like the sound of this one. So here are a couple of albums that not only that I decided to have in, but these are not my choices. I decided to add the last two in as like examples of what other people would think. The Beatles' Let It Be. Let It Be was released in 1970 before the band's breakup, and this was produced none other than Phil Spector. Although George Martin was present around this time, Phil Spector's wall of sound production can be heavily divided upon fans alike because not many people really liked the idea of having his own idea of orchestra sounds that he decided to throw in on some of these tracks, like Across the Universe and The Long and Winding Road. Thankfully, not all of it is overproduced because you can still hear more of the sound of the band, but with Phil Spector's ideas, it kind of buries the atmosphere and the mood of what the Beatles wanted the sound to be. And here's what Paul McCartney had to say about this experience with Spector.
McCartney was deeply dissatisfied with Spector's treatment of some songs, particularly The Long and Winding Road. McCartney had conceived of the song as a simple piano ballad, but Spector dubbed in orchestral and choral accompaniment. McCartney unsuccessfully attempted to halt release of Spector's version, or at least have it altered. Despite the criticisms leveled at Spector over the years for his handling of the material, Lennon defended him in his December 1970 Rolling Stone interview, saying, "He was given the shittiest load of badly recorded shit with a lousy feeling to it ever, and he made something of it." When EMI informed Martin that he would not get a production credit because Spector produced the final version, he commented, "I produced the original, and what you should do is have a credit saying, produced by George Martin, overproduced by Phil Spector."
Well, there you have it. Whether you would like Phil's production or not, I personally don't hate it. I mean, I think it is a nice thing, but at least he didn't do it far too much on this album. Otherwise, it would have been far too tiring for me to get used to it. And I really do like this album, even though it is quite unfinished, like Bob Dylan's Self-Portrait, for example. But with Let It Be, some people would add this in this type of category. And the last album that I would like to add in, Pink Floyd's The Division Bell. Now this has been targeted for some people because the production was far too clean. I find the production to be really, really good, but some people would say that it's too clean and the overuse of reverb and delay can be a bit tiring to really listen to the album because of that type of production. Of course, it's not like the production of Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here, The Wall, and it is still one of my big favourite Pink Floyd albums without a doubt. So that is really it, guys. I would be interested to see your picks for albums you consider to be overproduced in the comments below. So let's just make a big conversation and let's be involved in this kind of topic. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.